Racist cops bully. Black woman, her 8-year-old son, fights back like a pro-lawyer. The slam of the car door echoed like a gunshot. Danielle Carter's wrists were red and raw from the cuffs, her back pressed against the hot metal of the squad car, her 8-year-old son Elijah screaming and pounding his fists on the window as they locked her inside. "You're hurting her. She didn't do anything. That's my mom." The two officers, both white, ignored him. Officer Branning, tall and stocky with mirrored sunglasses, glanced back with an annoyed grunt. Officer Teller, younger but just as dismissive, muttered something about disorderly conduct as he slammed the passenger door shut. Danielle locked eyes with her son. "Baby, it's okay. Stay calm. I'll be fine, all right? Just breathe." But Elijah wasn't breathing. His chest was heaving, his tiny hands balled into fists. The last thing he saw was the fear in her eyes, and something else. Resolve. Like she was telling him, "Don't let this go." And Elijah wouldn't. It had started 20 minutes earlier in the school parking lot. Danielle had pulled into the designated parent pickup area outside Jefferson Elementary. She was early, so she sat in her car listening to a podcast while waiting for Elijah's final bell. That's when the cruiser pulled up behind her, lights flashing but no siren. She looked in her rearview mirror, confused. Officer Branning knocked on her window with 2 sharp raps. Danielle rolled it down. "Ma'am, we got a report of a suspicious vehicle circling the school," he said. Danielle blinked. "Circling? I've been parked here for 20 minutes, waiting for my son." Branning narrowed his eyes. "License and registration." She handed it over without argument. Her hands were steady, her voice polite, but the second Officer Teller returned from the cruiser. He barked out, "Step out of the vehicle now." "What's going on?" she asked, voice firmer. "You fit the description of a woman involved in a theft at a nearby gas station. You're being detained." Danielle didn't get to speak. The next thing she knew, her arm was being twisted, her purse dropped to the ground, and her face was shoved against the hood. Other parents nearby pulled out phones, recording. A few teachers peeked out the building door, but no one intervened. When Elijah came out and saw his mother being shoved into the squad car, his legs froze. She had always told him, "If something ever happens, stay calm, ask for help, and don't talk back to police." But this wasn't just something. This was everything. Back at home that night, after a night with a neighbor and no word from the precinct, Elijah sat on the floor of his room, laptop open in front of him. His mom had told him bedtime stories from when she was in law school, before she dropped out to take care of him after his dad left. She had told him about due process, civil liberties, how anyone could stand up and fight back with the law on their side. And now, staring at the blinking cursor in a Google search bar, Elijah whispered to himself, "What's a civil rights violation?" Downstairs, Mr. Green, their elderly neighbor and retired civil litigator, paced the kitchen with his cane. "You say the kid saw the whole thing?" he asked the neighbor who picked Elijah up. "Everything," she replied, "and he hasn't stopped asking about lawsuits and due process since." Mr. Green exhaled slowly. "Then maybe it's time the city learned what a smart black boy can do." The next morning, Danielle returned home on bail. Her wrists were bruised. Her phone had been lost in custody. She walked in the door, eyes swollen but still upright. Elijah launched into her arms. "They said you tried to resist arrest, Mom, but I know they're lying." "They always say that," Danielle said quietly. "But this time we won't let them get away with it." Later that day, Elijah stood in front of Mr. Green with a yellow notepad filled with scribbles. "I want to file a lawsuit," he declared, "like an official one." Mr. Green stared at him. "You're 8 years old." "I don't care. I can't let this go." She was just waiting in her car. The old man sat down and gave the boy a long look. Then he smiled. "Okay then, Counsel Elijah, let's start with what you know." They began with the video a classmate had sent to Elijah. It showed Danielle being cuffed and dragged without resistance. Mr. Green showed Elijah how to timestamp incidents, log each moment, annotate the officer's conduct. They pulled city policy, state guidelines, and past misconduct claims against Officers Branning and Teller. Elijah soaked it up like water. Danielle, meanwhile, was hesitant. "I don't want him to get obsessed with this," she told Mr. Green. "Too late," he said, "and frankly, he's damn good at this." 3 days later, Elijah uploaded a video to TikTok, a calm, clear-eyed narration of what happened, backed by the security footage and the law he was learning. His caption was simple. "My mom was arrested for picking me up from school. I'm 8, and I'm fighting back." Within 24 hours, it had 1.2 million views. By the end of the week, it had gone global. Hashtags erupted. Justice for Danielle, #Elijah, the lawyer, Mr. 8-year-old V's system. Local news caught on. Reporters started calling. The police department issued a vague statement about investigating the incident. Officer Branning was placed on temporary leave, pending review. Danielle stared at the screen, disbelief washing over her. "You did this?" Elijah smiled. "I'm just getting started." But behind the scenes, pressure was building. City Hall wasn't pleased. A senior officer named Lieutenant Gray called a closed meeting. "This kid is weaponizing social media," he snapped. "He's making us look like monsters." "He's 8, someone muttered. "He's dangerous," Gray said, "and I want him shut down." Little did they know, Elijah had just filed his first formal complaint with the Civilian Review Board, citing unlawful arrest and excessive force. It was only a PDF typed slowly with Mr. Green's help. But it would be the first blow in a battle that would shake the entire city. The morning sunlight poured through the kitchen blinds, but the mood inside the Carter household was anything but warm. Danielle sat at the table in silence, staring at her cup of black coffee. She hadn't touched it. Elijah was on the floor, knees tucked to his chest, surrounded by papers and printouts from the night before. Danielle finally spoke. "You didn't sleep, did you?" "Nope," Elijah replied, flipping through his notebook. "I read 3 cases about unlawful detainment, and I memorized the 4th Amendment." Danielle gave him a soft smile. "You shouldn't have to carry this." Elijah looked up. "But I want to." The doorbell rang. Danielle flinched. Elijah jumped up. "It's Mr. Green," he said, racing to open the door. The old man stepped in, holding a brown folder in one hand and a banana muffin in the other. "I brought breakfast and probable cause," he joked, setting both on the table. Danielle raised an eyebrow. "You're really going along with this?" "Your son is sharper than half the law clerks I trained," he said seriously. "And what happened to you wasn't just wrong. It was illegal. If the city wants to play hardball, then let's bring a bat." He opened the folder. Inside was a neatly organized file, officer complaint forms, footage stills, notes from Elijah, and legal definitions printed in bold. "We're filing today," Green said. Danielle looked from the folder to Elijah. "You're really doing this?" Elijah nodded. "They didn't just arrest you, Mom. They made me feel powerless, and I don't want any other kid to feel that way." Danielle reached over, pulling him into a hug. Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "Okay, let's do this. But I want to be part of it, too." That afternoon, they drove to the Civilian Review Board office downtown. Danielle wore a blue blazer, despite the bruises still visible on her wrists. Elijah sat next to her, his feet swinging off the waiting room chair, clutching the folder like a briefcase. A young black woman named Kendra Morales stepped out to greet them. "Ms. Carter, Elijah, come on in." Inside, the walls were lined with framed photos of protests, legislative change, and police accountability movements. Kendra motioned for them to sit. "You've got quite a bit of attention online," she said, smiling kindly at Elijah. "That TikTok hit over 5 million views. We've received hundreds of emails referencing your case. Elijah sat up straighter. Did any of them help? Actually, Kendra said, opening her laptop, you got the attention of someone very important. Meet Deputy Inspector Olivia Barnes, Internal Affairs Division. She turned the screen, and on the video call appeared a stern-looking woman in a gray suit. Her voice was sharp and efficient. I've reviewed the footage. The arrest was excessive. Based on what I've seen, there's grounds for suspension. Danielle blinked. Just suspension? Barnes raised a brow. For now. Internal investigations take time, and Branning's got friends in high places. That line lingered in the room. Danielle leaned forward. So what do we do? Barnes replied evenly. You go public. You push harder. You make it impossible to ignore. Elijah whispered, I can do that. Kendra nodded. You already have. But we'll need more than a video. We need testimony, documents, witnesses. I've got witnesses, Elijah said. 2 parents filmed the arrest, and Ms. Hamilton, my teacher, saw it too. Kendra's smile widened. Then we have a case. Later that night, while Danielle was resting, Elijah sat across from Mr. Green in their living room. Legal pads covered the coffee table. Mr. Green was impressed, but cautious. You understand what you're doing, right? He asked. Going up against the police department, the city, the whole system. I'm not scared, Elijah said softly. I'm angry. Mr. Green smiled. Then let's make them listen. Meanwhile, Officer Branning stood in the locker room of the precinct, slamming his fist into the steel cabinet. His face was red, his voice tight with fury. This is ridiculous. I followed protocol. No, you didn't, said Officer Teller nervously. You jumped on her. There wasn't even confirmation she matched the suspect. I did what I had to do, Branning growled. That kid, that brat? He's playing hero. I say we nip it before it gets out of hand. Teller looked uneasy. We're already under scrutiny. Barnes is sniffing around. Branning stepped close, voice low. Then maybe we send a message, just enough to rattle them, remind them who runs this town. He didn't realize the conversation was being picked up by the security camera in the corner, or that someone inside the department had already forwarded it anonymously. Back at school, Elijah noticed 2 new kids following him around during recess. They weren't in his class. One bumped into him hard at lunch, knocking his tray. Oops, the kid sneered. Another whispered, Bet you think you're special 'cause you're famous now. Ms. Hamilton stepped in quickly, separating the kids. But Elijah noticed the boys both had the same last name stitched onto their jackets. Branning. He went home silent that day. That night he asked Mr. Green, Can cops get their families to hurt people too? Mr. Green went still. Why? Elijah shook his head. Just asking. The war had begun, and Elijah was learning the cost of standing up. But he also knew he wasn't alone, and that made him dangerous. Elijah Carter sat at the dining room table, feet barely touching the floor, eyes locked on a legal pad cluttered with scribbles. Across from him, Mr. Green slowly leafed through a thick binder labeled Case File, Carter v. Branning. His reading glasses were tilted slightly on his nose, a look of growing admiration tightening the corners of his mouth. I swear, kid, he said, adjusting his glasses, if you were 12 years older, you'd be the most terrifying law student at Columbia. Elijah didn't look up. That's the plan. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, the tension thickened. Danielle emerged from the hallway, her phone still pressed to her ear. They're stalling, she said, ending the call. Kendra said the city's lawyers are demanding another review of the footage, and the precinct hasn't released the incident report yet. Elijah's pencil froze. They're trying to bury it, Mr. Green nodded grimly, or delay it long enough to make people forget. Classic tactic. Danielle sat beside her son, rubbing her temples. How do we fight back? We make it unforgettable, Elijah said, suddenly rising from his chair. If they won't talk, we'll make them listen. That night, Elijah recorded a new video. No theatrics, no music, just a solemn kid in a hoodie speaking with the calm clarity of someone twice his age. My name is Elijah Carter. I'm 8 years old, and I watched my mom get arrested for something she didn't do. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't fighting, she was just tired and black. The video went viral in hours. By morning, news vans were parked outside their modest home in Jersey City. Reporters jostled for space on the sidewalk. A CNN anchor called Elijah the young voice of justice. Talk shows debated whether an 8-year-old could truly understand civil rights. But no one denied one thing. The kid was compelling. Inside the house, Danielle clutched Elijah's hand. This is bigger than us now. But not everyone was celebrating. Across town, Officer Branning stood in front of a laptop in his garage, red-faced and shaking. "This kid's gonna ruin me," he hissed, slamming the lid down. He turned to his brother, a private investigator with some shady side gigs. "You still have access to those databases?" "Yeah, why?" "I need dirt. On the mom, on the lawyer, even the kid." His brother looked hesitant. "That's risky." Branning stepped forward. "Do it." Meanwhile, Elijah received an unexpected DM request on Instagram from someone claiming to be a friend of the movement. The message read, "They're digging. Be careful what you say, they want to twist it." He showed it to Mr. Green. "Anonymous?" Green asked. Elijah nodded. Mr. Green took a deep breath. "Welcome to your first smear campaign." Later that week, Danielle received an official notice from her job. The city had reconsidered her employment status at the Department of Social Services, citing conduct unbecoming of a public employee. She was fired. Danielle sat in stunned silence at the kitchen table. Elijah stared at the letter in her hand. "They're punishing you because of me." "No, baby," Danielle said, swallowing hard. "They're punishing me because I dared to fight back. That's what they do." Elijah shook with quiet rage. "Then we push harder." That evening, Elijah gave a speech outside the courthouse steps, surrounded by dozens of supporters. He stood on a crate, flanked by Mr. Green and Kendra Morales, his small voice amplified by a megaphone. "They think if they silence my mom, they silence me. But I'm still here, and I won't stop until justice is louder than their lies." Across the crowd, a stranger in a hoodie was filming discreetly. Later that night, the footage was posted to a private group labeled Blue Line Brotherhood. The comments were vicious. "This brat needs a lesson." But they didn't know the lesson was already coming, just not the one they expected. The next day, Elijah returned to school to find Miss Hamilton waiting at the door. Her face was pale. "Elijah," she whispered, crouching to his level, "someone broke into my car last night. The only thing missing was the folder you gave me with the witness statements." His stomach dropped. "Did you tell the police?" Her eyes darkened. "They were the ones who told me not to make a report." Mr. Green called a press conference immediately. In front of flashing cameras and live microphones, Danielle stepped to the podium, flanked by Mr. Green and Kendra. "This isn't just about race," she declared. "It's about power. It's about fear. And right now they're terrified of an 8-year-old boy who knows his rights." The twist no one saw coming landed like a thunderclap. The next morning, a leaked internal memo surfaced online. The memo, allegedly from a captain within the Jersey City Police Department, explicitly instructed officers to neutralize public threats to department image, including leveraging personal information where appropriate. It was damning. Public outrage exploded. The mayor's office released a statement promising an immediate independent investigation. Officer Branning was placed on paid leave pending review, but the Carter family didn't flinch. As Danielle watched the news that night, she turned to Elijah. "They're scared of you," she said, brushing his curls back. "I'm not scared of them," Elijah replied, voice calm, and in that moment she didn't see her son. She saw a lawyer, a fighter, a kid who wasn't done yet. Elijah sat quietly in the back seat of a rental car while Danielle drove with stiff hands gripping the wheel. Neither of them said much as the sun dipped behind the Jersey skyline. The air felt heavy with silence, but inside the car, tension pulsed like a ticking clock. Danielle broke the silence first. "I didn't think it would come to this. Losing my job, watching you be followed home from school. This isn't the kind of war an 8-year-old should be fighting." "I'm not fighting it alone," Elijah replied, eyes still glued to the window. The car pulled up to a small community center in Newark. The lights inside glowed warm, a stark contrast to the cold air outside. A mural on the building's side read, "Justice begins at home." Tonight's meeting was hosted by an organization called Voices for Accountability. Danielle had never heard of them before last week, but now they were part of her lifeline. Inside, the small auditorium was packed with neighbors, activists, and a few media cameras. At the front sat an unexpected guest, Congresswoman Lena Brooks, a black woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that scanned the room with unwavering focus. Danielle hesitated. "What is she doing here?" Mr. Green leaned in. She saw Elijah's speech. She reached out personally. "Says it's time to expose the system, and she wants your story at the heart of it." On cue, Elijah walked onto the stage, holding nothing but a printed copy of the internal police memo. Cameras clicked, phones raised. The boy didn't flinch. He held it up like it was Exhibit A. "This memo proves they weren't just trying to cover up one mistake. They were organizing a strategy to silence people like us. They called us threats, but I'm not afraid to be loud." The room erupted, but in a conference room 2 miles away, Officer Branning sat across from Deputy Commissioner Salvatore Ridge, his jaw tight. "Internal Affairs is breathing down our necks," Ridge snapped, "and now we've got a kid running circles around the department." "He's not just some kid," Branning grumbled. "He's rehearsed, polished. This is someone's playbook." Ridge narrowed his eyes. "Are you saying the kid's a plant?" "I'm saying something doesn't add up." Back in the auditorium, Congresswoman Brooks took the mic. "I'm calling for a congressional review of the Jersey City Police Department," she declared, as gasps filled the room. "But more than that, I'm sponsoring the Elijah Carter Protection Act, a bill designed to protect minors who expose corruption." Danielle nearly dropped her phone as she filmed. Her hands were shaking. But the moment was short-lived. The following morning, their house was vandalized, spray paint on their brick wall. "Stop lying." The footage from a neighbor's security camera showed 2 masked figures in dark clothing, but the police report later read, "No conclusive evidence of targeted intent." Mr. Green laughed bitterly when he read it. "They're still covering for each other." Danielle turned to Elijah. "We need to get out of town for a few days." "No," Elijah said firmly. "They want us scared. I want to go back to the community center. I want to finish what we started." His mother stared at him, torn between awe and fear. "You're not invincible." "No," Elijah replied, "but the truth is." Meanwhile, Officer Branning met in secret with a retired detective named Carl Dunlap, a man once ousted for misconduct, but who still had contacts deep inside the system. "I need dirt," Branning said. Dunlap smirked. "Then you'll love what I found." He handed over a folder with grainy photos, including one of Danielle speaking with a known activist who'd once been arrested during a protest that turned violent. "They're going to spin this," Dunlap said. "Turn her into a radical, paint the kid as brainwashed." Branning smiled for the first time in days. The next morning, a local conservative tabloid ran a headline, "Mother of young lawyer linked to extremist movement." Danielle stared at the paper in disbelief. "This is fiction." "But it's the kind of fiction people love to believe," Mr. Green said grimly. It was time to go public in a way they hadn't yet. Total transparency. That evening, Danielle posted a raw, unfiltered video on her social media. No edits, no makeup, just a mother telling the truth. Yes, I attended protests. Yes, I spoke out against injustice, but that doesn't make me a criminal. It makes me a mother who refuses to raise a child in fear. The video exploded. Even celebrities started reposting it. And then the unexpected happened. A former officer, Vanessa Hughes, who had served under Ridge and Branning, came forward anonymously. Her email to the Carter legal team read, "I have documents proving Branning tampered with evidence in past arrests, and Ridge covered for him. If you're serious about fighting this, I'll testify." It was the twist no one saw coming. A cop willing to turn on her own. As the Carters prepared for court, Danielle pulled Elijah aside. "You started something bigger than any of us imagined." Elijah looked at her, calm and focused. "Then let's finish it." Danielle Carter stood just outside the courthouse, her heels clicking nervously against the concrete as she paced in a tight circle. Elijah sat on the bench nearby, quiet, flipping through a printed version of the law he had quoted during his last public speech. The tension between them was palpable, not born of anger but the sheer gravity of what they were about to walk into. "You sure you want to do this?" Danielle asked, pausing to look at her son. "I was born ready," Elijah replied without looking up. "But are you?" Danielle gave a half laugh, then exhaled deeply. "Let's go." Inside, the courtroom was already buzzing. The case had caught national attention. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the pews were packed with reporters, activists, and skeptics alike. Everyone wanted to see if an 8-year-old boy could take on a system designed to break grown men. Their attorney, Janelle Ruiz, a fierce civil rights litigator from Brooklyn, stood waiting by their table. This will be the first pre-hearing. Mostly procedural, but make no mistake, everything said in this room will be dissected by the media. At the prosecution table sat Officer Branning in uniform, stone-faced. His attorney, a smug man in an expensive suit named Richard Langford, leaned in to whisper something, prompting Branning to smirk. When the judge entered, an older black man named Honorable Milton Rhodes, the room hushed. The hearing began. Ruiz stood and presented the motion. "We are here to request a full inquiry into the misconduct by Officer Branning, supported by direct testimony from the minor, Elijah Carter, who was unlawfully detained and verbally abused during the incident in question." Langford rose slowly. "Your Honor, we question the reliability of an 8-year-old's testimony. Children are imaginative, easily coached, and vulnerable to manipulation." Judge Rhodes arched a brow. "Yet you claim he was dangerous enough to warrant police intervention? Curious." Langford hesitated. Then the twist came. Ruiz turned to the judge. "We also wish to submit new evidence, a recorded statement from former officer Vanessa Hughes detailing systemic cover-ups and specific misconduct tied directly to Officer Branning." Murmurs echoed through the courtroom. Langford immediately objected. "Your Honor, that recording was obtained without a formal subpoena and is inadmissible unless verified." Judge Rhodes waved his hand. "We're in a preliminary hearing, Mr. Langford. Let's hear it." The bailiff played the recording. Vanessa's voice came through the speakers, trembling but clear. "I saw Branning falsify a report on Elijah Carter. The boy was calm, never combative. Ridge pressured me to keep quiet. I couldn't anymore." Danielle couldn't believe it. Neither could Branning. He turned white. Langford tried to intervene. "Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt to sway emotion." Rhodes leaned forward. "You're damn right it's emotional. This is a child we're talking about." Outside, as the hearing paused for recess, Elijah and Danielle were approached by a woman in her early 30s. "You don't know me," she said, "but I watched what happened to you on the news. I was pulled over with my infant in the back seat 3 years ago. Branning smashed my taillight and said it gave him probable cause. No one believed me. Elijah looked up at her. "We believe you." The woman handed over a notarized affidavit. "If you're building a case, I want in." They returned home that evening exhausted, but spirits rising, until they opened the mailbox. Inside was a manila envelope with no return address. Inside, a photo of Danielle from years ago at a protest, mid-shout, alongside headlines from conservative blogs calling her aggressive and unfit to raise a child. Attached was a sticky note. "You'll lose him in court." Danielle collapsed onto the couch, her hands trembling. "I thought they were coming after me," she whispered. "But now it's you." Elijah sat beside her. "Let them try. The more they threaten, the more truth we shine." That night, Janelle Ruiz called. "I just got word from a friend at Internal Affairs. Ridge is under pressure. If we move quickly, we can petition for an emergency deposition with Vanessa before they try to discredit her." Danielle stared into the dark hallway. "Do it. Let's keep going." Elijah, who had been pretending to sleep, whispered into the dark after she left the room. "They think I'm just a kid, but I'm the kid who won't back down." The city skyline loomed behind the courthouse windows as the storm clouds rolled in, painting the glass a somber gray. Inside, the atmosphere was no different, tense, expectant, and thick with anticipation. Elijah sat in the witness room with his mom, Danielle, and their attorney, Janelle Ruiz. He was dressed in a tiny navy blazer, a white button-down, and his lucky sneakers, the ones he'd worn the day it all started. Janelle placed her hand on his shoulder. "Elijah, what you say today matters. But you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest." "I got this," Elijah said quietly, eyes focused. "They think I'm just a kid, but I know more about justice than they ever will." Meanwhile, in the main courtroom, the gallery had filled beyond capacity. Journalists jostled for a glimpse of the boy who had become an unexpected legal sensation. Supporters held signs just outside the glass doors. "Justice for Elijah, no more Brannings." At the defense table, Officer Branning sat rigid, jaw clenched. Next to him was Captain Ridge, forced to testify by court order. His eyes flicked nervously across the room, locking onto a familiar face sitting in the back. Vanessa Hughes. The judge entered. "Let's proceed with the witness testimony." Elijah stepped up to the stand. The courtroom fell silent. "State your name for the record," Janelle said. "Elijah Carter." "And your age?" "8. Almost 9. Janelle nodded. "Can you tell the court what happened the day Officer Branning stopped you and your mom?" Elijah took a breath, glanced at his mom, then began. "We were walking home from the library. Mom was holding my hand. Officer Branning drove by slow. Then he stopped and said she matched a suspect, but we weren't doing anything. He made her sit on the sidewalk. He said I was lying when I asked for her badge. He put his hand on his gun." Gasps filled the courtroom. Janelle leaned in. "Did you say anything to Officer Branning?" "I told him he was violating Civil Code 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, deprivation of rights under color of law." The judge blinked. "Excuse me?" "That's what it's called when an officer abuses their power," Elijah added calmly. "I read it in my mom's law books." A murmur rose among the crowd. Langford jumped up. "Objection! He's clearly been coached." Judge Rhodes raised a hand. "Overruled. This child is quoting federal statutes better than some first-year law students." Then came the real twist. Janelle walked to her table and picked up a folder. "We'd like to submit a sworn deposition from Vanessa Hughes," she said. "It details not only misconduct by Officer Branning, but evidence of a broader pattern under Captain Ridge's command." Branning shot Ridge a look. Ridge stiffened. Judge Rhodes nodded. "Proceed." Vanessa was called to the stand. The room fell into an electric silence. "I was a patrol officer for 3 years," she said. "I saw Ridge and Branning manipulate reports, plant narratives to justify racial stops. They called it preemptive safety. I called it profiling. When I tried to report it, Ridge buried it. The courtroom erupted. Langford shouted, "She was dismissed from duty under mental stress." Vanessa met his glare. "I left. I wasn't dismissed, and I kept the files." She pulled out a flash drive. Janelle took it with gloves and handed it to the clerk. It contains over 20 internal memos, video clips, and complaint suppressions, all signed or approved by Captain Ridge. Sweat poured down Ridge's neck. Branning's face had gone pale. Judge Rhodes slammed the gavel. "This court will take a recess. But let me be clear, this is no longer just about a traffic stop. This court is prepared to initiate an ethics investigation into the entire 19th Precinct." Outside, Danielle and Elijah stood in a hallway, catching their breath. Supporters were waiting, cheering softly when they appeared. Danielle turned to her son. "You didn't just speak your truth, you sparked something bigger." Elijah didn't smile. He looked past the cameras, the chants, the reporters. "They tried to scare us into silence," he said, "but we made them listen." Back inside, Ridge was on his phone, whispering to someone unseen. His hand shook. "We're going to need a deal," he muttered, "because if that kid keeps talking, we're all finished." The courthouse was abuzz with reporters lining the marble hallways, their cameras flashing every few seconds. The walls seemed to echo with whispers about the boy, the whistleblower, the explosive testimony. Inside the courtroom, the energy was different now. It wasn't curiosity or spectacle anymore. It was accountability. Elijah sat quietly beside his mother, holding her hand. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't even tired. His eyes were laser-focused on the front of the courtroom where Officer Branning now sat, not as an enforcer of the law, but as a defendant. His face was drained of the smugness he'd once worn, like armor. Across the aisle, Captain Ridge shifted uncomfortably. He knew what was coming. He knew the dominoes had already started to fall. Judge Rhodes entered. This court will now hear the final round of witness testimony and closing statements. Janelle Ruiz stood. "Your Honor, I would like to call our final surprise witness, Detective Michael Garrity, formerly of the 19th Precinct." There was a stunned silence as Garrity walked in. He was older, mid-50s, white, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that told stories. He walked straight to the witness stand, looked squarely at Ridge and Branning, then raised his right hand for the oath. "I've been silent for too long," Garrity began, "but I watched that boy speak yesterday, and I realized it was time." Janelle approached, cautious but steady. "Detective Garrity, can you tell the court what made you come forward today?" "I worked under Ridge for over a decade. I saw what they did to families like Elijah's. The so-called safety stops weren't about safety. They were about statistics, making quota, intimidation. And when officers like Vanessa tried to speak up, Ridge made sure they got buried." Gasps echoed across the gallery. Branning slammed his fist on the table. "This is all lies. This is a setup." The judge glared. "One more outburst like that, and you'll be removed from this courtroom." Garrity continued. "They called it the Eagle List. Black and brown individuals in the neighborhood they marked as frequent subjects. Danielle Carter's name was added after she filed a complaint last year when Branning harassed her at a bus stop. That's why they targeted her again. That's why they stopped her and Elijah." Danielle's hand trembled slightly, but Elijah squeezed it tighter. She looked down at him. He nodded once. Quiet strength. Janelle handed the judge a printed email chain. "We submit this as Exhibit 19, internal emails confirming the Eagle List was approved by Ridge himself." Ridge's mouth fell open. "This isn't what it looks like. We were protecting the neighborhood." The judge stared. "By targeting an 8-year-old child." Ridge didn't respond. Outside the courthouse, news vans were broadcasting live. Inside, it was closing arguments. Langford stood for the defense, but even his voice faltered. My client, Officer Branning, acted in good faith based on information provided by his superior. This is a misunderstanding that's grown into a media circus. Janelle stood, calm, controlled, lethal. Let's be clear, she said. This isn't about misunderstanding. This is about misuse of power. This is about a child, a brilliant, brave child, who had to memorize federal law just to feel safe walking with his mother. She turned to the jury. Elijah Carter is not a lawyer. He's not a politician. He's a child. And yet he was the only one in this room who acted like a true officer of the law. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Rhodes recessed for deliberation. It didn't take long. After just 30 minutes, the jury returned. We find Officer Daniel Branning guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and falsifying reports. Branning's head dropped. He didn't even look at Ridge, who now looked like he'd aged 10 years in a day. The judge nodded slowly, then turned toward Ridge. Captain Ridge, based on today's testimony, this court recommends a formal investigation into your conduct and supervisory failures. You will be placed on administrative leave pending further review. The gavel dropped. Outside the building, Elijah stepped onto the courthouse steps to a waiting crowd. Microphones thrust forward, questions flying. Danielle tried to shield him, but he looked up and whispered, I want to say something. She hesitated, then nodded. He stepped toward the crowd, his voice clear. This isn't just about me and my mom. It's about everyone who's ever been told to stay quiet, to stop asking questions, to stop fighting back. I'm only 8, but I know when something's not right, and I won't stop talking until it is. Reporters froze. The moment was electric. As they walked back to the car, Danielle wrapped an arm around him. You were incredible, she whispered. You think it's over? He asked. No, she said, but now they know we're watching. Behind them, Branning was led away in handcuffs. Ridge stood on the steps alone, reporters ignoring him now, his career hanging by a thread. And in the crowd, someone held up a sign, Elijah for President, 2042. The week after the verdict, life didn't return to normal, but maybe it wasn't supposed to. The media called Elijah the boy who cross-examined injustice, and while Danielle had tried her best to shield him from the cameras, the story had already gone viral. Every corner of the internet buzzed with clips of his courtroom moment, his voice steady and sharp as he quoted constitutional law to grown men in uniform. But what followed wasn't just attention. It was change. Inside a packed City Hall chamber, a new hearing convened, this time with more accountability than spectacle. Mayor Thompson had called it the reform session, and for once, city officials sat facing the community, not hiding behind closed doors. Danielle, seated in the second row with Elijah on her lap, watched silently as policy proposals were read aloud, mandatory body cams, civilian oversight, elimination of quotas, the Eagle List disbanded and criminally investigated. The name Elijah Carter was cited in several of the proposed reforms, not because he was a lawyer, not because he was famous, but because in a room full of power he had spoken truth without fear. And yet, despite the cheers and backpats, Danielle knew the story wasn't over. It came the night before the reforms were to be voted in. A knock at her apartment door, soft but deliberate. She opened it to find a man in plain clothes, Detective Garrity. I need to show you something, he said, holding up a flash drive. Danielle's heart pounded. She waved him in. Garrity loaded the drive into her laptop. On the screen appeared a grainy but clear video, surveillance footage from inside a precinct conference room. Ridge stood there with 2 other officers, one of them Branning, weeks before the incident with Elijah. I don't care who she is, Ridge said in the clip, voice dripping with arrogance. That woman files one more complaint, we make an example. Pull her over, find something. If she resists, escalate. We've been too soft. It's costing us control. Danielle froze, her breath caught in her chest. Garrity leaned forward. This was buried. Internal affairs never followed up. But now that the trial's over, I want this to be part of the public record. Ridge was running a campaign, not a department. Danielle stood, shaking. This changes everything. The next morning, she met with the mayor and handed over the drive. He watched it twice, jaw clenching tighter with each second. Then he looked up. Ridge won't see another day in uniform. True to his word, Ridge was arrested later that afternoon, escorted from his home while news helicopters circled above. His mugshot landed on front pages nationwide. It was the twist no one had seen coming, not even the defense team that had tried to paint him as a misunderstood public servant. For Elijah, it meant something more. He stood on the courthouse steps again, this time not to protest, but to speak on a panel about youth rights and racial profiling. He wore a small blue suit, oversized but charming, his afro combed into neat curls. As he took the mic, the room hushed. "I'm just a kid," he began, "but I know what's fair and what's not. We don't have to be old to be right. We just have to be brave." Reporters nodded. Teachers clapped. A few officers even wiped tears. But the proudest person in the room was Danielle, who stood in the back, one hand on her chest, the other holding a printout of the reforms passed that week. At the top, in bold, was the new title of the program inspired by her son's voice, the Carter Initiative. But even as change rippled outward, Danielle knew some things would take longer. Racism didn't end with Ridge's arrest. Bias didn't dissolve overnight. But what Elijah proved, what their family proved, was that justice didn't always wear a robe or a badge. Sometimes it wore a backpack and asked tough questions. As they walked back to their car, Elijah looked up. "Do you think Ridge really thought I was just a dumb kid?" Danielle smiled. "I think Ridge never imagined someone like you would stand up. And that's why he lost." A gust of wind swept through the street, catching the edge of a newspaper blowing across the sidewalk. On its front page, a headline read, "Courage has no age, boy who shook the system." Danielle picked it up, folded it gently, and placed it in her purse. That night, she and Elijah sat on the couch, watching the sunset spill through their apartment windows. For the first time in months, there was peace. Real peace. Not just the absence of chaos, but the presence of hope. And as the credits of a movie rolled silently in the background, Elijah turned, eyes curious. "What do we do now, Mom?" Danielle took a deep breath, her arm around him. "Now," she said, "now we live. And we make sure they never forget who we are. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, share it. Subscribe to the channel. Support voices that fight for justice, truth, and change. Because somewhere out there, another Elijah is waiting for the world to hear him. And together we can make sure it does.